You're just dead weight, Daniel. I have a new life now, and you don't belong in it. Those were the last words my mother said to me before she slammed the door in my face. I was 17. Just a kid, standing on the porch of the house I grew up in, my whole life packed into a duffel bag. It wasn't much, some clothes, a few books, an old stuffed bear I was embarrassed to still own. But when the door shut behind me, I felt like I had nothing. No home. No family. Just the echo of her voice ringing in my ears. She had been everything to me. My father left when I was 6, and I never heard from him again. It had been just the two of us for over a decade, scraping by in our tiny apartment, counting pennies to afford groceries. She used to tuck me in at night and tell me everything would be okay. That no matter how hard things got, she'd never leave me. That we were in this together. Lies. It all changed when she met Richard. Richard was everything we weren't. Tall, confident, and disgustingly wealthy. He had a mansion, a fleet of cars, and a laugh that sounded like it was polished with money. My mother fell for him instantly. And why wouldn't she? He took her to places she had only seen on TV, draped her in expensive clothes, introduced her to a world where people drank champagne at brunch and never had to check their bank balance. At first, I was happy for her. She deserved something good after all those years of struggling. But I started noticing the way she looked at me, the way he looked at me. Like I was a stain on her perfect new life. I was a reminder of the past she wanted to forget. A weight she was no longer willing to carry. Then one evening, she sat me down and told me, as casually as if she were discussing the weather, that Richard didn't want me in the house. That he believed a young man with no direction was a bad look for their new social circle. He thinks it's best if you stand on your own 2 feet, she had said, stirring her tea like she wasn't ripping my world apart. I asked if she thought that. She hesitated. Then nodded. I wasn't angry at first. I was confused. Hurt. Desperate to believe she didn't mean it. That she was just scared, or manipulated, or something anything but heartless. But when she packed my bags for me, when she handed me a few $100s and told me to figure it out, I knew. I wasn't part of her new life. I was a problem she had finally found the solution to. I spent that first night on a park bench. My pride kept me from calling friends, and I had no other family to turn to. I sat there in the cold, staring at my phone, rereading old text messages from her. Love you, sweetheart. So proud of you. Always, no matter what. Lies. I knew then that I was alone. And if I wanted to survive, I had to become someone who didn't need a mother. I never realized how much I took for granted until I lost it all. That first night on the park bench was just the beginning. By the end of the week, I had spent every last dollar my mother had given me. I told myself I could make it stretch, I just needed to find a job fast. But jobs don't come easy when you're 17 with no experience, no diploma, and no address. I walked into every store, every cafe, every gas station I could find. We'll call you if anything opens up, they'd say, barely glancing at me. I could see it in their eyes, kids homeless, kids a problem, kids not our problem. By the second week, hunger became a constant. A gnawing, insistent thing that turned my stomach inside out. I ate whatever I could scavenge, half-eaten sandwiches from trash bins, packets of ketchup mixed with water to pretend it was soup. I was humiliated, exhausted, and worst of all, I couldn't stop thinking about her. My mother. Was she thinking about me? Did she lie awake in that massive bed in Richard's mansion, wondering where I was? Did she feel guilty? Or was I already just a distant memory, erased as easily as an old voicemail? One night, it rained so hard I thought the sky itself was punishing me. My clothes were soaked, my teeth chattered uncontrollably, and I had nowhere to go. I ended up in a public library, sitting in a corner, pretending to read while I tried to dry off. That's when I met him. His name was Leo. Late 20s, rough around the edges, but he had this easy confidence about him, like the world couldn't touch him unless he let it. He sat down across from me without asking and said, "You look like you need a break." I almost laughed. A break? What I needed was a miracle. Leo was homeless too, but he had experience. He knew where to sleep without getting harassed, where to get food without digging through trash, which shelters were safe, which ones were more dangerous than the streets. Don't ever tell anyone you're under 18, he warned me. Cops pick you up, they'll throw you into the system. Foster care if you're lucky. If you're not, he trailed off. You don't want to know. I didn't ask. Leo took me under his wing, showed me how to survive. He taught me how to sneak into gym showers, how to talk my way into free meals at churches, how to look just clean enough that people wouldn't cross the street when they saw me. He introduced me to a whole underground world of people society had forgotten, kids like me, veterans who never got back on their feet, addicts who lost everything. I wasn't alone anymore. But I wasn't safe either. One night, Leo and I were walking back to the abandoned building we were crashing in when a group of guys blocked our way. I recognized them, local gang members, the kind of guys who didn't ask, just took. They knew we had nothing, but that didn't stop them from trying. One of them grabbed my duffel bag. The one thing I had left from my old life. I held on. I fought. I lost. He threw me to the ground, kicked me in the ribs, and walked away laughing. I just lay there, gasping for air, watching my last connection to my past disappear into the night. Leo helped me up, shaking his head. Gotta let shit go, man. Nothing's worth dying over. I wanted to argue. But he was right. I had nothing left to lose. Except myself. That night, as I lay on the cold floor, I made a decision. I wasn't going to live like this forever. I was going to crawl my way out of this life, no matter what it took. I was going to become someone they would regret abandoning. Someone the world couldn't ignore. Years passed. It wasn't easy. Hell, there were times I thought I wouldn't make it. But I did. I clawed my way out of the streets, one grueling step at a time. First, I found a job, a shitty gig washing dishes at a diner where the manager didn't ask too many questions. I saved every penny, slept in shelters when I had to, and when I could finally afford a room in a rundown apartment, it felt like I had conquered the world. But I wanted more. I didn't just want to survive, I wanted to become someone. I started taking night classes, working double shifts, doing anything and everything to make up for lost time. Then, by some cosmic joke, I found my calling in the most unexpected place, a stupid community theater audition. I only went because a coworker dared me. Thought it'd be funny. But when I stepped onto that stage, something clicked. For the first time in years, I wasn't just a forgotten kid who got thrown away. I was whoever I wanted to be. I chased that feeling like my life depended on it. I worked harder than anyone. Took every role, no matter how small. I studied, trained, pushed myself past every limit. And after years of struggling, failing, and getting back up, it finally happened. I got the role. A breakout part in a high-profile drama that turned me from a nobody into a rising star overnight. Suddenly, everyone wanted a piece of me. Casting directors. Producers. Agents. The world finally saw me, and they couldn't get enough. And neither could they. It started with a message. A simple email from a name I never expected to see again. Daniel, I'm so proud of you. I always knew you would do great things. I'd love to catch up. Call me when you have time. Mom. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Proud? She was proud? The woman who had tossed me out like garbage was suddenly proud of me? I didn't respond. But she didn't stop. Calls. Messages. A handwritten letter that showed up at my agency's office, telling me how much she missed me. How she had made a mistake. How she wanted to make things right. And then, just when I thought she had given up, an invitation. A charity gala. Hosted by my mother and her husband. The same man who called me deadweight was now fundraising for at-risk youth. The irony almost made me laugh. I wasn't stupid. I knew what they wanted. Connections. publicity, money. But they had no idea who they were dealing with anymore. So I went. Not because I wanted a reunion. Because I wanted them to see exactly what they had thrown away. And I wanted them to regret it. The gala was extravagant, exactly what I expected from them. Chandeliers dripping with crystals, waiters gliding between guests with trays of champagne, the kind of event where people pretended to care about charity while flashing their designer watches. I stepped out of the car, dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than Richard's first car. Cameras flashed. Reporters called my name. It was surreal, being wanted by the same kind of people who once looked through me like I didn't exist. And then I saw her. My mother stood near the entrance, draped in an elegant gown, her arm linked with Richard's. She was older, of course, but still carried that same careful poise, like she had sculpted herself into the perfect image of wealth. When her eyes met mine, I saw it. The flicker of hesitation. The uncertainty. She had no idea how this was going to go. Good. I approached them slowly, taking my time, letting the tension stretch. Richard forced a smile, reaching out a hand like we were old friends. Daniel. It's been too long. I let my eyes drift to his outstretched hand, then back to his face. I didn't take it. He dropped it awkwardly, clearing his throat. My mother stepped forward, her voice softer, almost trembling. Sweetheart, you came. Sweetheart. I hadn't heard that word from her since the day she packed my bags and shut the door on me. A camera flashed nearby, and I saw the reason for her sudden warmth and audience. This wasn't about me. It was about optics. The mother of a rising star reconciling with her long-lost son. A perfect story for the press. I smiled, but it wasn't warm. Of course, I said smoothly. Wouldn't want to miss such an important event. Helping kids in need? That's something I care deeply about. Her lips pressed together slightly, catching the venom in my words. But she recovered quickly. Years of practice. I wanted to say how proud I am of you, she said, her voice thick with something. Regret? Guilt? Or just a well-rehearsed act? I always knew you'd do something great. I tilted my head. Really? That's funny. Because I seem to remember you saying I was dead weight. Richard tensed beside her, his fake smile flickering. Now, son. Don't. My voice was low, steady. You don't get to call me that. Silence. Thick and suffocating. Then I turned slightly, making sure the photographers were in position. Making sure the moment was captured. Tell me, I said, my voice just loud enough for those nearby to hear. Do your guests know that the hosts of this wonderful charity event once kicked a homeless teenager onto the streets? Or is that not the image you're selling tonight? My mother paled. Richard's jaw clenched. I didn't wait for their response. I turned and walked away, the cameras snapping, whispers rippling through the crowd. Let them explain themselves. Let them squirm under the weight of their own hypocrisy. Tonight, I had taken back the power. And they would never forget it. I should have left after that. Walked away and never looked back. But something inside me, it wasn't done yet. So I waited. The night dragged on, the air thick with murmurs and stolen glances. My mother and Richard had retreated to a quieter corner after my little performance, likely trying to spin some desperate excuse. Good. Let them choke on it. I stayed long enough to let the weight of my words sink in, then made my way outside. The cool night air was a relief from the suffocating falseness of the gala. I was halfway to my car when I heard her voice. Daniel. I stopped but didn't turn. Please, she said, softer this time. Talk to me. I let out a slow breath, then turned to face her. She looked smaller. The confidence she wore so well had cracked, revealing something underneath. Something raw. Talk? I repeated. Now you want to talk? She flinched but held her ground. I know I made mistakes. But I need you to understand I didn't have a choice. I let out a bitter laugh. There's always a choice, Mom. You just chose him. Tears welled in her eyes. Real or not, I couldn't tell. I was scared, she admitted. All my life, I struggled. And then Richard, he offered me something I never thought I'd have. A real future. A chance to escape. Escape what? I snapped. Me? Your own son? She swallowed hard. I thought you'd be okay. I thought you'd find your way. And you did, look at you now. She reached for my arm, but I pulled away. You don't need me anymore, Daniel. You're stronger than I ever was. I shook my head, a hollow laugh escaping. You don't get to make that sound like love. That wasn't belief in me. That was convenience. It was easier for you to pretend I'd be fine than to deal with the guilt of abandoning me. Her lip trembled. I regret it. Do you? I tilted my head. Or do you just regret that I made it without you? Silence. The answer was in her hesitation. She had expected me to struggle forever. To disappear. To become someone she could forget. But instead, I had become someone she couldn't ignore. I sighed, my anger slowly giving way to exhaustion. You know what the worst part is? For years, I wanted this. I wanted to hear you say you were sorry. I wanted to believe there was some reason, any reason, that would make it hurt less. Her eyes searched mine desperately. And now? I exhaled, looking past her, through her. Now I just don't care anymore. Her breath hitched. I saw it in her face, that final, crushing realization. She had lost me. Not because of some grand act of vengeance. Not because I hated her. Because I didn't hate her. Because she was nothing to me now. She wiped her eyes, nodding slowly, as if she finally understood. I won't bother you again. I nodded. That would be best. Then I turned and walked away, this time for good. And I didn't look back. I drove through the city that night with the windows down, the cold air sharp against my skin. The streetlights blurred past, their glow distant and indifferent. I should have felt triumphant. Victorious. Instead, I just felt empty. For years, I had fantasized about this moment. About seeing the regret in her eyes. About making her feel the same abandonment I had carried for so long. And yet, standing there in front of her, watching her crumble under the weight of her own choices, I realized something. She had never been the final boss in my story. She was just a woman who made a choice, a selfish, cowardly choice, but a choice nonetheless. And I had spent years giving that choice too much power over me. I had already won long before tonight. Not because I humiliated her. Not because I walked away. But because I had built a life without her. A real life. A career. Friendships. A purpose. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need her. She, on the other hand, would have to live with what she had done. And I would move forward, carrying nothing of her with me. As I pulled up to my apartment, my phone buzzed with a message from my agent. Another script offer. Another opportunity. Another step forward. I smiled to myself, letting the past slip away, one breath at a time. Because I wasn't that 17-year-old kid standing on a porch with nothing anymore. I was someone. And that was the best revenge of all.